Like most people these days, I love a good zombie story. I played the original Resident Evil in the basement in the dark late at night, and I'm playing Resident Evil Requiem right now. For some reason, I never really got into much of The Walking Dead or its 5,000 spin-offs. I don't really know why I didn't get into it, but members of the US government must have, because the year after the show originally aired in 2010, both the Department of Defense and the Centers for Disease Control came out with full-on, real-life zombie apocalypse survival plans, and yes, they are very, very real. And we're going to go over the details of the DoD plan right now. Please make sure to stick around to the end so you don't miss the full context, because this story is just like the Boy Scouts. It is intense. And please do like and subscribe if you want to be part of a rational community of like-minded people who want to do some effing good in the world. I just hit 1,000 subscribers recently, and I'm inching closer to the total watch hours I need to start making some doll hairs on this thing, and it would be super cool if the zombie apocalypse guide was the thing that got me there. Just saying. As always, my sources are all down in the didgeridoo, including a link to the plan itself, which you can read for all the details that I don't fully cover here. The Department of Defense plan is called Conplan 8888, also known as Counter-Zombie Dominance Operations. The mission statement of Conplan 8888 is written as follows. On order, Commander, U.S. Strategic Command will execute global military operations to protect humankind from zombies and, if directed, eradicate zombie threats to human safety and aid civil authorities in maintaining law and order and restoring basic services during and after a zombie attack. So one thing we need to get out of the way right up front is that if you were in the military or you know someone in the military, then you probably know that the military has more acronyms than weapons. I think part of the goal with that is essentially just to frustrate enemies to death, or maybe drive them to boredom so they just stop trying. Guys, there's just too many letter jumbles, let's just go home. This jumble of letters here means Commander, U.S. Strategic Command. U.S. Strategic Command is written as USSTRATCOM, and it's one of the top tier pillars of the U.S. military forces, along with other commands like Cyber Command and Space Command. For your information, U.S. Strategic Command takes COCOM, or Command Authority, in the event of a zombie invasion. You're welcome for that information. If you haven't guessed so far, the Department of Defense plan is designed more for military training and defense against the zombie menace, with the eventual aim of re-establishing society, whereas the CDC plan is designed for emergency preparedness in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Conplan 8888 was written on April 30th, 2011, and initially it was classified. It's a very flexible plan designed with a considerable number of variables in mind. And the reason it's so flexible is because there just isn't a lot of hard science and concrete details to draw from, and a lot of possibilities to account for. The sources and inspiration and the bibliography includes novels and comic books, and the plan itself states very clearly that zombie fiction is where they're drawing most of the reasoning behind the decisions they made when writing it. The guide was developed by the DoD's Joint Operational Training and Execution System, or JOPS. And even though it was once classified, I can tell you about it now because it was released to the public through a Freedom of Information Act request. So now all of us can know exactly how to be safe in the event that we're overrun by zombies. And not just any zombies, mind you, but all the various kinds of possible zombies, because they're all accounted for in the plan. Conplan 8888 lists a number of background assumptions in order to collect as many variables and countermeasures to those variables into one comprehensive catalog. One of those is a list of a detailed breakdown of the various possible kinds of zombies that might be among the angry hordes coming for your brains, or not coming for your brains, depending on the type of zombie in particular. Let's go down the list and find out what kind of zombies you might have to face and what you need to know about them. Pathogenic zombies are your run-of-the-mill infected. They're turned into zombies either through some kind of bacterial infection or some sort of contagion. Radiation zombies are a class of zombie that comes about after exposure to intense electromagnetic or particle radiation. Evil magic zombies, and I cannot believe that this is a thing in a United States government defense plan, but I love that it is. The guide explains that these zombies are created by occult experimentation or through some process that can only be described as evil magic. Space zombies happen when, say, you're an astronaut and you're out on a spacewalk and you encounter some black goo. Is venom a space zombie? Space zombies are made through some chance encounter with an extraterrestrial contaminant, or they could also be some kind of life form that originates in space and somehow finds its way to Earth. Weaponized zombies are specifically those made by a bad actor or foreign adversary in a possible bioweapon attack. And an additional variable that this adds into the mix is that the source of the infection can therefore be mobile. It can create multiple hordes of zombies in a number of different places and maybe even all at once. So there's no way to really successfully lock down an origin point or cut off the spread. Symbiont-induced zombies are made when some terrible creature enters a human host and turns them into a zombie. The plan notes that unfortunately there is currently no way to save the host even if the symbiote is removed. So that's sad. This next one is vegetarian zombies, and I think maybe you might be able to guess what these are, but you might actually be wrong, because they're talking specifically about zombies that are literal vegetarians and eat actual plants. And this one's in here because of the popular video game Plants vs. Zombies. The plan notes that these zombies pose no direct threat to human life, but indirectly they can do a lot of damage. They could potentially wipe us out by eating all the food crops, or through deforestation because they'll just eat the whole Amazon rainforest or whatever. Last but very much not least is the category of chicken zombies. And this is kind of what I mean about the plan including all possible variations of even remote forms of a real zombie threat, because the phrase chicken zombies sounds ridiculous. And yes, we are really talking about actual chickens, so it's very straightforward. But this is also the only real-world example of actual zombies on the entire list. Chicken zombies are real, and they are made when farmers incorrectly euthanize chickens with carbon monoxide, and they look dead when they're buried, but then they claw their way out of the dead chicken pit and back into the world of the living to haunt us for the rest of their days. The plan specifically goes out of its way to note that chicken zombies are simply terrifying to behold. These little guys wander around aimlessly for a while before eventually succumbing to organ failure. However, they do present no direct threat to humans. Maybe it's obvious by now, but the plan is designed to save the American population and humanity in general from all those possible kinds of zombies. The stated purpose of the plan is threefold. First, to quote, establish and maintain a vigilant defensive condition aimed at protecting humankind from zombies. Second, if necessary, conduct operations that will, if directed, eradicate zombie threats to human safety. And finally, aid civil authorities in maintaining law and order and restoring basic services during and after a zombie attack. The Conplan 8888 end state reads as follows. Sources of zombieism are eradicated. Zombie forces are precluded from massing and threatening human population centers, and potential adversaries are deterred from developing zombie weaponization programs. The Counter-Zombie Dominance Operations Plan assumes a scenario where American forces are cooperating with other world powers and conducting operations around the globe to support allied forces and also helping out traditional adversaries. It's an oddly warm sentiment, cooperating with our enemies around the world, but also that's a pretty common scenario in a lot of science fiction stories where the only thing that brings humanity together is a major existential threat from outside of our species. However, another assumption the plan makes is that we may also face a scenario where our enemies are responsible for creating the zombie threat in the first place. So that one's not so fun. Other assumptions the plan makes are really detailed and based, again, on all the zombie lore we have from fictional accounts. Here are some fun highlights. One of my absolute favorites is this one. The law of armed conflict will not apply to zombies. A few other fun points. The only assumed way to effectively cause casualties to the zombie ranks by tactical force is the concentration of all firepower to the head, specifically the brain. The human brain will still be functioning in the zombie state, but it is universally agreed that the only part actually active will be the brainstem. The only way to ensure a zombie is dead is to burn the zombie corpse. Evil magic zombies are the only class of zombie that may not be vulnerable to this measure. The Chaplain Corps may provide the only viable means of combating evil magic zombies. As such, atheists could be particularly vulnerable to evil magic zombie threats. Checkmate, atheists. One particular part of the plan is a little concerning to me, even though I'm fully aware that none of this is real to begin with, but there is a section of the plan called shortfalls and limiting factors, and among those are a couple of fairly alarming statements. One of them is, U.S. Strategic Command has no ground combat forces capable of repelling a zombie assault. So that's a little concerning to me for a number of reasons. Also concerning is toward the beginning of the document, they list out 6 distinct phases. The phases are numbered 0 to 5. The first phase, 0, is like recon and taking stock and data collection, and 5 is rebuilding society. In between, you have a training phase, and then a mustering armed forces phase, and then deploying forces offensively and taking the initiative and dominating the zombie threat, and there's also a stabilization phase. Inside the dominance phase is a step that mandates the lockdown of all USSTRATCOM facilities for 30 days. And then in the shortfalls and limitations section, there's a point made that U.S. STRATCOM forces do not currently hold enough contingency stores, i.e. food and water, to support 30 days of barricaded counter-zombie operations. So that seems bad. One of the biggest factors in the whole plan is the repeated discussion of supplies and stockpiles. It's unlikely that we'll have enough stuff to get through a zombie attack if it's not simply an isolated incident. The first item in the shortfalls section talks about this when it says, adequate zombie defenses require sandbags, sand, barbed wire, anti-personnel mines, riot control chemical agents, mop gear, and petroleum to create flame barriers. These supplies may not be present in sufficient volume to allow desired levels of defense against zombie incursion and could severely tax available logistical support infrastructure. You might also be thinking somewhere in the back of your mind that the commander of the U.S. Strategic Command is gonna need a command center. Where is there a secure enough location that could house all of this execution capability for all of these varying contingencies that we see in the plan? Just one location is given as a possible command center for counter-zombie dominance, and that is Offutt Air Force Base. Quote, Offutt Air Force Base provides the only semi-hardened location capable of sheltering personnel responsible for commanding and controlling a coordinated combat action against zombie forces. JFCC Space and U.S. Cybercom Operations Centers are located within protected military facilities. However, zombie forces will likely overrun those installations within the first days of a zombie invasion. So, good news and bad news. And the one thing you see in movies all the time are these mobile command centers in this type of science fiction story, and the authors of the plan took that into consideration too, because the discussion of an airborne command center is listed in the shortfalls section. And it's in the shortfalls section because it's unlikely to be a viable option after the first week of a zombie invasion. Because even though in-air refueling is absolutely an option and would totally work fine, the bases where the refueling planes would take off would be themselves overrun by zombies very quickly. Side note, when I was typing this out, I wrote the words overfun by zombies. Something tells me they're not coming to these bases with party hats and streamers though. If all else fails, and we end up losing hard in our war against the zombies, the plan authorizes the use of some real and immense devastation in order to save what's left of the scraps of humanity. Inside the constraints section of the plan, it notes that U.S. STRATCOM forces must maintain emergency plans to employ nuclear weapons within CONUS to eradicate zombie hordes. Okay, so far we've gone over the details of what's in the plan and taken it all at face value, but the authors tell us that we shouldn't do that. There are several disclaimers in this document, but the one that serves as kind of an introduction is very enlightening. It gives us a bit of background into how this thing even got written and why. It turns out the whole reason that the Jopes team made Conplan 8888 was because that they accidentally found out lots of people in positions of authority who needed to read and understand these kinds of plans found the idea of making one of these for the zombie apocalypse very funny. The whole thing is really just an educational tool. It's designed to teach people how to follow these kinds of plans and how to use them against real-world threats. It's not an instruction manual. It's a strategic thinking system that you have to employ against a threat. And this is a good way to teach people how to do that. Quote, if you suspend reality for a few minutes, this type of training scenario can actually take a very dry, monotonous topic and turn it into something rather enjoyable. The other stated reason for the counter-zombie dominance plan is to protect sensitive information. One major part of the reasoning for the con plan was that they wanted a really solid teaching tool that could be used to train students that wouldn't include any sensitive intelligence, so it could be read and shared and studied without fears of real secrets being leaked. Part of one disclaimer reads, using this fictitious scenario avoided concerns over the use of classified information. It resolved sensitivity to using real-world nations or scenarios, and it better engaged the students. The other big thing is that it prevents any kind of awkwardness or geopolitical tensions because they didn't have to use any historical or made-up examples with real allies or adversaries. Additional rationale for Conplan 8888 was the idea that the training tool had to develop a completely unrealistic fictional scenario that could just never happen in real life. There was a great deal of discussion and troubleshooting centered around the idea that the public would be alerted to the training exercise and come to believe that it was real. Jade Helm comes to mind. Basically, the underlying concept is that the DoD found out that people like talking about zombies, and they like talking about how they deal with zombies if they were real. Then they found out that service members paid more attention to the idea of planning for a zombie apocalypse than they did for planning for a real apocalypse. So they took advantage of that, and they decided to make learning fun, and no surprise, more people wanted to learn. And if you think learning should be fun, then make sure you're subscribed so you catch the next fun, weird, engrossing pile of humanness that I talk about next. And also make sure to stick around for the CDC Zombie Survival Guide, which will be coming out one of these days, and that'll be right up here when it does. And if you want to check out some further reading from the Department of Defense that they suggest and use to model this plan after, some of the citations and the references for Conplan 8888 are the novel World War Z by Max Brooks, and a book called Zombies vs. Unicorns, and also an article titled Zombie Chickens Taking Over California. Just some really nice bathtub reading. And please don't forget to do some good wherever you personally can in your own little sphere of the world. You guys know what would stop the zombie chicken invasion, don't you? The Colonel and his secret blends of 11 herbs and spices.